I remember the exact moment they fired me, not because of poor performance, not because of budget cuts, but because of who I loved. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when my manager, Brian, asked me into the conference room. I had a folder in my hand with 3 months of market analysis that helped us land a $2.3 million contract. I thought he was going to congratulate me. Instead, he slid a piece of paper across the table and said, "We're letting you go. You're no longer a fit." For the company, no explanation, no warning. Just like that, 7 years of loyalty were erased in 60 seconds. I stared at him, trying to process what he meant by no longer a fit. He didn't say it out loud, but he didn't have to. I had seen the look since I started. Dating Elena, the way our VP would cut me off in meetings, the way HR suddenly flagged every minor decision I made. They didn't fire me for being bad at my job. They fired me for not hiding who I am. I walked out with my head high but my hands shaking. They thought that was the end of me. They had no idea what was coming. The days after I was fired were a blur of silence and suppressed rage. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I refused to give them that power. But the humiliation clung to me like wet clothes. My inbox was flooded with emails asking about the project I had been leading, like I still worked there. They were using my data, my forecasts, my strategies. And I was sitting at home, unemployed, with rent due in 2 weeks. Elena, my girlfriend, came home to find me sitting on the floor, my laptop open but untouched. She knelt beside me, took my hand, and asked what happened. I had been holding it in for hours. I tried to explain. I told her everything. The vague excuses, the way Brian couldn't even look me in the eye, how the room smelled of cold coffee and cowardice. She listened, silent, and then did something I didn't expect. She smiled, not out of joy, but out of recognition. "That's what they do when they're afraid of you," she said. "They erase you before you become unstoppable." That night, something inside me shifted. I opened a new document and wrote down every client I had ever managed, every deal I had helped close, every campaign I had built from scratch. Not to beg for a job back, but to take what I knew and turn it into something they couldn't touch, and I wasn't alone. Elena had once worked in branding for a Fortune 500 company, but left because her ideas were constantly stolen and presented by male colleagues. We understood each other in a way no corporate handbook could explain. We had both been silenced, sidelined, and underestimated. So we decided to build something new. Not a job, not a side hustle. A weapon. We called it Ember, a boutique consultancy that specialized in brand resurrection for companies who had been burned by bad PR, dying relevance, or tone-deaf leadership. But that wasn't the real mission. The real mission was to steal everything they said we couldn't have. We launched with zero capital but endless fire. I used my severance to pay for a domain, basic hosting, and a pitch deck. Elena reached out to her network. We didn't sleep much. We didn't eat much. But we were alive in a way we hadn't felt in years. And then, on a rainy Monday, almost. Exactly 1 month after they fired me, my phone buzzed. It was a number I knew too well, a former client. One I had personally grown from a 200K account to a 1.4 man-hours powerhouse. He was furious. "They replaced you," he said. "And it's a mess. They don't know what they're doing." And then, "Can you help us?" I looked at Elena, and we smiled. We didn't say yes immediately. That was the first rule of power. Don't chase, attract. I told the client I'd consider taking on a private consultation if their leadership was open to feedback. The truth? I was already building a strategy that would turn their crisis into our breakthrough. By Thursday, they sent over a contract. Not just a gig, a full-scale rebranding project with a 6-figure retainer. I printed the PDF, laid it on our kitchen table, and stared at the name on the header, Whitmore and Gray. The same name that sat above the glass wall of the conference room where I was fired. The irony was so rich it almost tasted sweet. Elena popped a bottle of cheap champagne we had been saving for a moment. This was it. We worked like possessed artists. Elena handled the visuals, the mood boards, the color theory, the tone of voice. I handled the business soul. I knew their values better than they did. I knew which phrases made them look elite and which made them look out of touch. I reimagined their mission statement, tore apart their press language, and built a brand that looked like it had swallowed its past and come out stronger. But this wasn't just about a paycheck. It was about control. We were building Ember not just to survive, but to witness. And then came the meeting, a formal pitch session with the full executive board of Whitmore and Gray. I walked into that same conference room, same smell, same chairs, same coffee pot. But this time, I wasn't the one seeking approval. I was the expert. I looked Brian in the eye. He barely recognized me. Gone was the tired employee he had fired in a 3-minute meeting. In her place stood someone who had built an empire from ashes. I took a breath, placed the presentation remote on the table, and said, "Let me show you how to fix what you broke." There was silence, and then applause. The presentation ended with unanimous agreement to begin the campaign. I walked out of that room knowing something had shifted, not just in my bank account, not just in my career, but in them. They now depended on me, and they had no idea what else I had planned. The campaign launched to rave reviews. Overnight, Ember was the name on everyone's lips. Small agencies reached out to us for mentorship. Big brands asked if we had room to consult. Former yes. Coworkers sent awkward emails like, "Didn't realize you had this in you." But I wasn't chasing praise, I was collecting proof. Each email, each article, each interview, they were puzzle pieces, evidence, because revenge wasn't just going to be symbolic, it was going to be legal. Elena was hesitant when I first brought it up. "You want to go after them?" I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the folder I'd kept hidden even from her. Screenshots, NDA violations, Slack messages from Brian marked with the time and date he leaked my pitch deck to Heather, the woman who accidentally replaced me. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Exactly. I didn't just want to win. I wanted them to fall, publicly, and the timing had to be perfect. So I waited. 6 weeks into the campaign, I got the call I was expecting. "Can you come in and present our Q3 roadmap to the full board?" Of course I could, but not before calling an employment lawyer. His reaction? "This could take down more than just your old boss. Are you ready for that?" I smiled. I'd been ready since the moment they fired me and called me a bad fit. I walked into Whitmore and Gray's boardroom like I owned the building. This time, I brought receipts. And the silence after I dropped the final slide, an email from Brian that contradicted their public statements, was deafening. One board member asked to pause the meeting. Another one whispered, "Is this real?" I nodded. "You can keep pretending you didn't know," I said, "or you can deal with it now, quietly." I left them with a flash drive and a deadline, 72 hours to respond, or the media would get it. Next, Elena was waiting outside. When she asked what I said in the room, I simply replied, "I gave them a choice, and they'll regret whichever one they pick." They thought I wouldn't do it. They underestimated the quiet rage of a woman who rebuilt herself from nothing. But when the 72-hour deadline passed without even an email, I sent the flash drive to 4 reporters. Each one had a copy. Each one had an NDA-free green light from my lawyer. And each one had a fire in their belly to break the biggest corporate scandal of the year. It hit Twitter first, then LinkedIn, then the inboxes of Whitmore and Gray's partners. Within 2 hours, the headline was everywhere. Fired for being gay? Former strategist leaks damning emails from marketing giant. I didn't post anything. No tweet, no Instagram story, no told you so. I just watched. Brian deactivated his socials, Heather locked hers, and guess who slid into my DMs? Marlon Whitmore. Yes, the CEO himself. "Can we talk?" My answer? A calendar invite. Public on Zoom, recorded. He looked different. No arrogance, no smug grin. Just a man realizing the building he stood on was built by the woman he fired. "We want to settle," he said. "And we want to make a formal apology." I leaned forward. "You don't get to apologize because you got caught. You apologize because you're sorry, and you're not." He stayed silent, so I gave him my terms. $1.2 million settlement, a full-page apology ad in Fast Company. My name reinstated as lead strategist for the Ember campaign. And Heather? She resigns. Publicly, his jaw clenched. You're asking for blood? No, I said, smiling. I'm offering mercy. Take it or leave it. I ended the call. Elena turned to me, eyes wide. Was that smart? Maybe not, I replied. But it was right. That night, I went live on TikTok. Just 10 seconds. Just one sentence. Remember the woman you called too much? She's the reason your stock just dropped 8%. The comments exploded, and so did the narrative. 3 days after the leak, I received a package, no return address. Inside was a simple manila envelope and a burner phone. The screen lit up with a single message. You're not the only one. I have receipts. Let's talk. It was from Morgan Patel, senior data analyst. She'd been with the company for 8 years, invisible, overlooked, silenced. Turns out I was just the first domino. She had everything. Slack messages, hidden metrics, timesheets doctored to erase overtime, and one particularly damning video of Heather laughing in a meeting about how diversity is just a checkbox for the board. We met in secret. A coffee shop 2 towns over. She slid the flash drive across the table and said, I'm tired of playing nice. Let's burn the handbook. I brought it straight to my lawyer. He nearly choked on his drink. This isn't just wrongful termination, he whispered. This is class action lawsuit territory. By the end of the week, 6 more former employees had joined. All women, all queer, all discarded in silence. We filed the paperwork. Media picked up the scent again. The headline, From Fired to Fearless, LGBTQ+, Women Unite in Historic Lawsuit Against Marketing Giant. Elena squeezed my hand as we watched. The coverage. You started this, she whispered. You didn't just take your power back. You gave it to others. But not everyone was celebrating. Brian had disappeared from the public eye. Heather was rumored to be in hiding. And corporate. Shares? Down 18%. The empire was crumbling, and we were just getting started. I wasn't prepared for what came next. One rainy Tuesday morning, while sipping burnt coffee at the co-working lounge, I got an unexpected email. Subject line: FYI, thought you'd want to know. The sender? Anonymous. The content? A PDF attachment titled Internal Memo, Talent Restructure, Phase 2. I hesitated. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it, and just like that, every illusion I had left was obliterated. The document outlined plans to outsource creative direction to an external firm. Not just any firm. This one belonged to the CEO's old fraternity brother. And the new role that would lead the entire project? A refined public-facing candidate, as they put it. My name wasn't even mentioned. I wasn't shocked by the betrayal. I had grown used to it. But what crushed me was the specific language they used. Her persona does not align with the Hedebosh image we aim to project. It was coded, yes, but I knew exactly what it meant. They didn't want someone who looked like me. A queer woman with a sharp tongue, sharper instincts, and zero interest in playing corporate dress-up for fragile investors. They wanted someone safe, someone invisible. I shut my laptop, packed my bag, and walked out, not just from the building, but from every piece of myself that ever asked for permission. Spent the next few weeks building something I had been dreaming of quietly for years, a boutique consulting brand that worked exclusively with inclusive, progressive companies. No gatekeeping, no toxic boardrooms, just raw talent and honest work. I used my severance check to lease a studio. I partnered with a designer who was also pushed out for being trans. I brought in a strategist who had been overlooked for talking too much in meetings. I called it Spectra. Because we were all colors, they tried to mute, but I wasn't done. My ex-boss didn't know that during my time at the company, I had been working closely with their biggest client. I was their point of contact. I knew their goals, their pain, points their vision better than the agency ever had. And now that I had left, they called me directly, not to ask what happened, to ask if they could follow me. And I said, let's build something better, together. That was the moment I realized Power doesn't come from titles. It comes from knowing your value so deeply, no one can make you question it again. And that's when the dominoes started to fall. It was late at night when the confirmation came in, a single line from their chief marketing officer. "We're ready to move forward. We want your vision." I stared at the screen in silence, not from disbelief, but from the weight of validation. For months, they'd used my ideas, my designs, my campaigns, and funneled credit to polished men in fitted suits. Now, my name was on the contract. My girlfriend, Eva, was asleep on the couch beside me, exhausted from running back-end operations while working her own full-time job. I leaned over, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "We're in." The next day, I walked into our new studio with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Exposed brick walls, cheap but clean furniture, one espresso machine from Craigslist, and a whiteboard filled with campaign blueprints scrawled in dry erase chaos, and in the center of it all, our name, Spectra, handwritten in red marker, underlined twice. Eva greeted me with a smile and a raised eyebrow. "Is this the one that fired you for being too unpolished?" I laughed. "Yep, guess they polished themselves into irrelevance." We got to work immediately. We didn't have the budget. We didn't have the equipment. What we had was fire. Every late-night Zoom. Every pitch deck built on borrowed Wi-Fi. Every ad campaign built on empathy, authenticity, and lived experience, not analytics or boardroom jargon. Within 2 weeks, we delivered a pitch that turned their stagnant brand into a movement. Their numbers soared. Their audience doubled. Their engagement exploded. Suddenly, other brands began watching. People who had once overlooked me were now quoting my strategy slides in LinkedIn posts. Industry newsletters mentioned Spectra with cautious curiosity. One of my old coworkers even DM'd me. "Wait, is this your agency?" I left them on red, but the real storm was just beginning, because now I had something I didn't have before, leverage, and I knew exactly how to use it. My former company didn't even see it coming. The first hint was subtle, a budget cut, then a reshuffling, and finally, a desperate LinkedIn post from their director of marketing asking for outside consultants who could help rejuvenate brand trust. Brand trust? I nearly laughed. The same people who questioned my appearance, who whispered behind my back, who told me I didn't fit the brand, were now bleeding credibility because they had silenced the only voice that ever resonated with their audience. And I was just getting started. Eva and I launched our next campaign anonymously. We called it Unfiltered. A raw, unapologetic message to queer youth, a message we never saw growing up. And we made sure it landed on every screen, billboard, podcast, and subway ad their company used to dominate. Except this time, our logo was in the corner, Spectra was now the brand. The backlash was instant. Not against us, against them. "Why weren't you talking like this when we needed it?" "Spectra understands me. Your company never did." Their quarterly earnings dropped, their press coverage turned cold, and then came the email from my old CEO. Subject, "Let's talk." "We've been watching your recent work. Impressive. Would love to explore ways to collaborate." I stared at the screen for a moment, then forwarded it to Eva with one sentence. "He doesn't get it. We're not knocking. We own the building now." And I was only just beginning to reclaim the space they tried to erase me from. The offer that could have changed everything, if I hadn't already changed it myself. A week after their CEO emailed me, the company's PR head reached out. Then, the CFO. Then someone from the board. They were all circling like vultures. But this time, the dying was happening on their side. Their message was the same, just in different flavors. "We'd love to collaborate. What you're doing at Spectra aligns with our new vision. We think your leadership could be transformative." Translation, they were scared. My success was casting a shadow over their brand, and they wanted to buy their way into the light. They even invited me to keynote their diversity summit, the same event I'd once been excluded from due to optics. I didn't respond right away. Not because I needed time, but because I wanted them to feel the silence. And then, after a week, I sent a single slide. It was a photo from our latest campaign. Eva and I, standing in front of a crowd of queer teens, their faces lit up, holding signs that read, "I see me." At the bottom, I wrote, "This is what transformation looks like. You can't rent it, you have to earn it." They didn't reply. And that's when I knew. I hadn't just taken their biggest client. I'd taken their future. They wanted me to disappear. So I turned myself into a legend. After the silence came the noise, articles, podcasts, panels, interviews. Suddenly, I was being invited everywhere, not just because I was good at what I did, but because I represented something they'd all pretended to champion: resilience, diversity, authenticity. But behind every headline, I remembered the boardroom that once made me feel like a stranger in my own skin. The cold coffee, the glances, the whispered words like unprofessional, too bold, not marketable. So I started telling the whole story. Not the polished PR version, but the truth. I told them about being fired after I came out, about the HR meeting where no one looked me in the eye, about how they used my ideas but erased my name from every slide, and the world listened. Clients didn't just leave my old company, they ran from it. No one wanted to be associated with the hypocrisy anymore. Eva and I launched a podcast. We called it Not Your Token, and it exploded. Thousands of downloads turned into millions. We featured LGBTQ+ founders, creatives, scientists, athletes. Every guest another reminder that being different wasn't a liability. It was a superpower. Brands began reaching out not to fix their image, but to learn, to listen, to change. And as our voice grew louder, I noticed something. The people who once laughed at my voice, my style, my love, were now quoting me in their investor calls. Naomi didn't just get her power back. She made it impossible to take from anyone else again. She stood where they said she never belonged and owned the moment. The annual industry summit had always been hosted by the same types of people: men in expensive suits, women who fit a certain mold, and a panel full of safe voices saying the same recycled things. But this year, Naomi James was the keynote speaker. I stepped onto that stage in a tailored white power suit, holding Eva's hand for a moment backstage as cameras flashed. The same suit color they once said clashed with my skin. The same woman they once said, "I shouldn't love publicly, but I was no longer here to please. I was here to lead." I began my speech with silence. Just a moment, a long one. Then I looked out into the crowd, and I saw familiar faces, former bosses, ex-colleagues, even the CEO who whispered I wasn't polished enough. I smiled. Then I told the truth. Not just my truth, but the truth of every woman, every queer person, every outsider who had ever been told they didn't belong. I shared the stats they tried to hide. I revealed the emails they thought I'd deleted. I exposed how many talented people had been pushed out for the sake of brand consistency, and the room didn't just listen, it leaned in. Some shifted uncomfortably, others nodded. A few cried, but no one could deny what was happening. By the time I finished, the standing ovation wasn't just polite, it was thunderous. Naomi James was no longer a whisper in the back row. She was the headline, the speaker, the leader, and the one setting the rules now. They tried to erase her. Now she's the future they can't ignore. 2 months after the summit, I got the letter, not an email. A letter. Thick paper, gold-embossed header, signed by the very board that once deemed me unfit to lead. It was an offer. They wanted me back, but not as a consultant, not even as a VP. They offered me the Chief Strategy Officer position, the very title they once gave to the man who mocked my voice and blocked my ideas. I laughed. Eva read the letter beside me. We were sitting on our apartment balcony, sunlight spilling across her sketchbook as she designed our next campaign. The one that would spotlight LGBTQ+ creators, single moms, and underrepresented designers. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no. Instead, I sent back a new letter. I proposed a partnership, not just a title. A full restructuring, mandatory inclusion reforms, open salary data, an annual accountability report run by an independent team, and at the bottom of the letter, I wrote, "You can't fix what you built on silence, but we can rebuild loudly." They agreed. Today, I walk into that building as a partner, not an employee. Eva runs creative, I run strategy. And the halls that once silenced me now echo with new voices, proud, powerful, diverse. This wasn't just revenge. It was a revolution. I didn't just get my seat at the table. I bought the damn table, changed the chairs, and left the door open for everyone they once locked out. Naomi James didn't just survive. She made the system beg for her return and rewrote the rules for everyone else.